Well, Janice, a lot of favourites there. Looking at that, what does it say about BBC Two and the state that BBC Two is in?
Well, I think we've had a great year. I mean, anyone who knows me well knows I'm not given to optimism, so for me to be positive is quite a big deal. But when I look back on what we've done, I'm really, really proud, actually. I think we've had, recognised as Channel of the Year, record numbers of Baftas and RTSs, which are great for all of us involved in making the programmes. But I just think when you look at those show reels, you get a sense of the range of different things where I think we've been successful. We've had an unparalleled season of dramas, an incredible range. You look there, we've gone from Parade's End to The Fall, via Top of the Lake and Dancing on the Edge. What a variety of different things to have. The factual offer, I think, has just been outstanding this year, from proper conventional classic documentary form through to new ideas about how you tell factual stories. The success of a series like Claridges, showing you can get over 4 million viewers to watch a proper classic documentary. Reinventing early evening at 8 o'clock. I mean, obviously, Bake Off is the standout property there, and how much we love it and how great it is to see it back this week doing absolutely stonking numbers. But also looking at things like, Sewing Bee. I mean, who'd have thought that you could bring big audiences to programmes about sewing, or Airport Live? All of those things feel to me showing that it's a channel at the moment that feels got a lot of energy, got a lot of originality, and is delivering across quite a wide range of areas.
We'll come back to some of those shows you mentioned later on, but it's interesting, you were talking about Baftas and you were also talking about viewing figures. What matters more, in your view? Is it the critical success or rating success?
Well, I think the thing about running BBC Two is that the two are, you can't divide them, really. First of all, I think it's important to say that sometimes when you're asked that question, it's almost as though you can't have, they can never exist in the same place. That actually, if you have something that is quite large, it can't be also quite good. And I think one of the things I'm very happy about on Two is the constant way that we show that's not the case. So, if you did see Claridges, you see that is an outstanding documentary of any possible way. Also delivers amazing reputation into the channel because it's simply so good. So sometimes those things, when you're in a really sweet spot, they're the same thing. You will have a substantial audience, but also something that contributes to the distinctiveness and originality of the channel. But there are other times where they don't always join up in that way. And it's my job, I think, to get the balance between those things. I mean, I do believe that it does matter how many people watch BBC Two. I think if you're a producer, anyone who's made a programme makes it because in the end they want people to watch it. They want the right number of people who are going to be interested in that show to come to it. That's something quite profound about being a producer, I think, and I think that's amplified into a channel. If you make a show, you want the people who are going to enjoy it to find it and to get something out of it. So I also think that things that are small aren't necessarily better. Sometimes there's a sense that if it's small, it's pure. And my job is to make sure that the things we commission that we believe will reach large numbers of people nevertheless contain within them the DNA of BBC Two. But on the other hand, we also have to know that we will commission things sometimes that we know probably won't ever deliver a huge audience, but we commission those because we think they're important or because we think they're original or distinctive or surprising. And one of my tasks is to try and bring those together so that in the end they balance out a bit, so that the channel feels as though it's got the right kind of balance between those programmes which are probably going to appeal to a very particular audience and those that have the capacity to appeal more broadly to everybody. But the key thing, just a very small point, the key thing, when you're commissioning things you think will be big, you still commission them because you believe in them. Because actually that's what keeps you honest, really. And the audience always know, is my view.
Well, I think you thought The Hour was going to be big. Let's just have a look at a clip from The Hour.
We haven't...
Haven't what?
We haven't... About us.
No, we don't need to stop talking. We talk too much. Instead, we have to do something. I am tired of it not being possible. It is possible. You are possible. You are possible with me.
Well, last year at the festival, you said the hour was smart, clever, sassy and beautiful to look at, which many critics agreed with you. But it was cancelled after the second series. Why?
It's quite rare for things to have 2 series on BBC Two. So I don't think that's... I still think it's all those things, actually. I think it was a great show, a great series, which I very much enjoyed. I mean, our drama slate is a very rich one, and it's almost impossible to imagine now that when I started running BBC Two, we didn't actually have any drama. I mean, it's come back into the channel relatively recently, but it's come back with such conviction and confidence that you could... Sometimes we have almost an embarrassment of riches. You know, we have so many things that we would like to do, and in the end, you do have to make difficult decisions about whether you bring back a series for a 3rd series or whether you, at that point, need to make decisions to actually bring in something new. And I think
but you clearly expected it to go on because it ended on a cliffhanger.
I think you know you make a decision in the end, looking at what the alternatives are if you don't bring it back. So you have to look and see, well, if we don't bring it back, we can do these other things, and you make a decision in terms of what the landscape of drama will look like in the future based on that thought.
But other things that rated better? I mean, be honest, the Series 1 was premiered with 2.89 million viewers, Series 2, 1.68 million. I mean, was this be honest, was this about the numbers?
I think a lot of our dramas, not all our dramas are commissioned to be ratings winners. I mean, some of them are, but some of them you commission because they bring a very distinctive flavour into the channel, and that's exactly a reflection of what I was just saying about having to balance that out. You know, we don't commission all our dramas for the reason that they're going to do 3 or 4 million. It's lovely when they do, but in the end, you do want a balance between the two things. And you know, we still have dramas which are perhaps more reputational. You look at something like Parade's End. I mean, that didn't do 4 million viewers, but who wouldn't have wanted that on BBC Two? You know, that's expressive of a different flavour, a different tone. And you want that, you know, you want there to be things which are not always going to be huge, but are of immense value to us. So the reason that there are all sorts of reasons why you might decide not to continue with something, but it would be quite wrong to think that that's just numbers.
So give us a sense of what makes a reputational drama on BBC Two.
Well, I suppose it reflects a bit on the channel as a whole. I mean, what Ben and I think, are always looking for is something that feels different. You know, I always think it's great when somebody gives me the first DVD for a BBC Two drama and I put it in the machine, and quite often in the first 5 minutes I can see this is the only channel that this would be on. That's always a great pleasure.
It's almost like a gut reaction. I mean, can you sort of explain what goes through your head?
Well,
at that point?
Sometimes it's about the tone of it, the way it's shot, the expectation it raises in you. It's about the nature of the script. I mean, it's a bit like Kenneth Clarke and Civilization. It's quite hard to describe, but you know it when you see it. And I think, you know, you can see how with genre drama, for example, you know, like Line of Duty, lots of channels have police procedural dramas in them. Very few of them, I think, have the kind of style and complexity and assurance. And sometimes they require a bit more of the audience. It's a very BBC Two thing. You've got to keep up a bit because there's a lot going on in terms of character, in terms of plot, in terms of the ambiguity sometimes of the moral position of it. So there's an awful lot happening there, and I think that's quite a distinctive BBC Two trope. So you can have something which in itself is a not unfamiliar genre, but what BBC Two does is something surprising or different with it, really.
I mean, You've said in the past that drama has to respect the audience. Are you worried that that didn't happen with The Fall? You know, the finale of The Fall, a lot of people were quite cross about that, weren't they?
I think once they knew the second series were coming, they were less cross.
Right. But do you think there might be some who resist watching it because they were so sort of cross about the last, or you think people won't be able to resist? Always very wary about making those sorts of predictions, but I think that if you were someone who was following that as so many people were and engage with it, I think you'll come back to find out what happens next. Okay, let's move on to comedy. And you've said your ambition is to find something to replace Miranda. Let's have a look at another clip, and I want to know whether this is it.
I should just mention, fluctuations in temperature may change some aspects of my physicality. So you might want to make allowances for that in any sizing up you do. Just be a bit more generous than you usually would. Is this all right? Or I can do a Christine Keeler.
Oh, don't use that chair.
What? Oh, right. Oh, don't worry about me. A little bit of a breeze never hurt anyone.
Well, we're all laughing here, but it didn't. I mean, it's not performing brilliantly, is it? So why hold on to a poorly performing? I'm asking you the opposite question, really. Why hold on to a poorly performing comedy?
Well, for the same reason. I don't think, comedy is the hardest thing. I mean, I've been a channel controller now for nearly 9 years. And I think in that time, that's the thing I've learned, is that comedy, in a way, is the hardest thing to predict whether it's going to be a ratings winner. And you have to go with your heart, really. You have to be prepared to take a chance on something. I think pre-watershed comedy is particularly difficult. It's very, very competitive. Everybody's looking for a pre-watershed success. I personally, that still makes me laugh. I mean, at the end of the day, you can only go with something that you think is funny. Brilliantly written by Graham Linehan, who's done a marvellous job with it. Fantastic cast. Sometimes you just follow your instinct and think, well, it's not... Because we haven't had a huge amount of pre-watershed comedy, I think there's also... People are perhaps not looking for it there yet, is that people need to get more familiar with the idea that there can be those sorts of quite technicolor laughs quite early on BBC Two. So, we'll hang on in there and see whether... there are a lot of fans out there. I mean, Count Arthur, when he was on Radio 4, as a great Radio 4 listener, I knew the series very well. He's always been a bit Marmite. I mean, you either really, really find it funny or you really, really don't. And I think that's true on television as well. But there is a big fan base there.
But you need something as well, don't you, that isn't Marmite, that more people find funny?
Well, sometimes it's good that, you're looking for something which... I think what you can't do on BBC Two is go, whatever the opposite of Marmite is, something very bland, I don't think will ever work for us. I think you're always looking for a strong flavour, and strong flavours sometimes are a bit divisive. I just think in the end, you've just got to follow your instinct and feel that this is a funny show. We believe in it. In the end, I can't make the audience watch it. If they feel at the end they don't want to, we've done our best. But we keep trying. You've got to keep getting in there, and you've got to be brave. We talk a lot about making brave decisions. Well, for me, this is quite a brave decision, but it's one I stand by. And it's, as I say, I watch that clip and think, well, I'm quite happy to have that on the channel because it makes me laugh.
There's BBC Two. At the end of the day, BBC Two comedy is quite Marmite, really. That is a very BBC Two quality.
Well, I think it's a bit more complicated than that. I think the comedy that we do after the watershed, I think people have it's probably appeals to a smaller audience because it tends to be quite clever, quite observant. It's often quite slow burn, or it's in a particular world. It's bigger in reputation than it is in size. So people, often you take a show like The Thick of It. Everyone knows about. When it was interesting, wasn't it? When Peter Capaldi gets made Doctor Who, everyone refers to Malcolm Tucker. He's become a kind of massive figure in the world, even if that show was never a show that was ever going to get 5 or 6 million. It still has a power in the culture, and I think that's often quite true of our comedy. That you look at something like The Trip that we're re-showing at the moment. I mean, I just think that's a work of genius. Frankly, I think it's an absolutely brilliant show. Interesting, when we first premiered that, people at the very beginning of it were a bit, I'm not quite sure what this is, what is this show? And then understood it and grew to love it. 2012, you became a kind of, though you literally, you think about words like omnishambles from The Thick of It, you think about all those phrases that came out of 2012, they don't have to be huge to be important on BBC Two. But in a way, I think that kind of comedy is more recognisable. We actually know what that looks like. I think it's a more challenging business to get a pre-watershed show for BBC Two because, with the exception of Miranda, that's been our big success, and we've got to keep trying to see what other sort of forms might work for our audience.
But it says something, doesn't it, that the most popular sitcom on BBC Two remains Dad's Army. Is there nothing new out there?
Well, I think that depends what you regard as successful. I think that's...
Well, the most popular...
Well, I've just been trying to describe how I think there are different ways of popular.
Sure, but...
And I don't think that in the end, I don't think that you could say that some of those comedies I've described are not popular.
But you've also said you'd like to have a ratings winner. I accept that it's all part of the sort of ecology of the channel, but in terms of a ratings winner, is there... Are you disappointed at how little new there is out there?
I think we've got a lot of new things. I think the difficulty is not about what's new or where the talent is. It's about finding. I mean, I think we've done. If you look at the comedy record of BBC Two over the last year, and you include things like Rev and Episodes and 2012, and they keep on coming. These works which are absolutely brilliant and first class. Who wouldn't want those on your channel? I do absolutely acknowledge, as anybody working in comedy would, that it's a much harder business to find a pre-Watershed big popular show. I don't think that means we haven't had success. I don't think that means that the comedies I've mentioned aren't popular. I do think you're right to say that it remains a challenge to find something for a mass audience at early evening, but we carry on looking, and we have to keep trying new things, or we'll never find it.
Well, we've touched several times on the identity of BBC Two, what you call BBC Two-ness. Let's have another look at a clip that perhaps illustrates better than words what it might be about.
Sandra's fabric is very light, which means she'll need to line her skirt.
I've made the decision to line it because I've picked a finer fabric, so it's just got a bit of texture, a bit of weight to it, so it's not quite...
Stuart is also planning to line his skirt.
Are you going to have time to line your skirt?
I don't know. So I'm going to cut it, and then if I do have time, I'll line it, and if I don't, then I won't. Okay.
Stuart, have you made an A-line skirt before?
I've never made a skirt before, Claudia, A-line or otherwise.
Lovely to have you here.
Thank you.
Is that BBC Two-ness?
Oh, yes, so much, so much. I mean, I think that it's a show that I absolutely love. And again, when we talk about bravery, we all swallowed quite hard thinking about whether to commission, could we commission a competitive sewing show? And I'll tell you, in my office, we had some sort of competitive sewing. Okay, what are we actually going to see? How's this going to work? But I think the thing that's quintessentially Two about it, firstly, you just wouldn't expect it, would you? We all know how competitive the 8 o'clock slot is and how hard it is to find new ways of doing entertaining formats in that territory. And yet for me, this has got all the things that I love about a BBC Two earlier evening offer. It's absolutely serious about what it does. So that actually, if you watch, and I watched every single one of them and stopped to make sure that I was really learning stuff. You will learn things. You will learn about scenes. You will learn. I know how to make, well, I'm not sure I could make one, but I know what not to do in terms of a spaghetti strap now. So
wow, well done.
It will actually tell you stuff. It really believes in the end point of it. It really believes that this is something that is worth doing. It's incredibly respectful to the competitors, and it takes them very, very seriously. It's got proper experts who know whereof they speak and will, as I say with the spaghetti strap, not be backward in coming forward to tell you. Whatever the sewing version of a soggy bottom is, you will find out from Sewing Bee. It's brilliantly cast so that you identify with different kinds of ways of wanting to do this thing. And I also think I was on The Late Show, we used to talk about things being zeitgeisty, and it is it feels to me like it's something of the moment, this idea that people are interested in making things for themselves, making things that they can own, trying to find a way of expressing a kind of creative life within the home. I mean, Bake Off is about that, really, as well.
Well, you mentioned soggy bottoms and Bake Off and so on. I mean, is there a risk still that Sewing Bee is a little bit niche, that, everybody loves to have cake, but not everybody wants to learn about the spaghetti what's-it?
Figures suggest not. I mean, for a first series doing well over 2.5 million, that's a good beginning. That is a really good place to be.
Can it ever be as big as Bake Off?
To be frank, I doubt it. I mean, I don't honestly think that. Wouldn't it be lovely if there were 7 million viewers for the final moment of the placing of the shoulder into the scene?
I'd slightly worry about that.
It may. Well, there was a time when we might have been a bit more sceptical about how interesting a problem making a breadstick could be. But we've proved that actually, if you can get that conjunction of all those things I've described, the genuine belief in the content, the fact that you cast it properly, the fact it's got real expertise in it, I do think it will grow. I think it's got the potential to grow. It was a extraordinarily powerful. It touched a nerve in a group of people out there who've been making their own clothes for quite a long time, and there are more of them around than you think.
What next, though? Was it you've done cakes, you've done sewing? I mean, what's the next sort of?
Well, you can imagine
passion?
Immediately we got quite a lot of proposals for knitting, or I mean, I think that would be the wrong thing to do. I think, you know, it would be wrong to say, well, sewing works, let's find another handicraft and do that. I mean, I think you have to be very, very cautious about Me Too, wannabe type approaches to this. I mean, I think what we try to do at 8 o'clock is to get a variety of different kinds of alternatives, so that although, you know, bake-off and format shows are incredibly important to us, you know, MasterChef professionals, all of those sorts of things are so important for us at 8. We've also tried to ring the changes elsewhere, though. So something like Airport Live, you know, that going into that territory of live television, looking at stargazing, those sorts of shows, which are perhaps not, you know, they're not formats in that conventional competitive way, but they do have an element of entertainment about them, which I think is what the audience are looking for at 8 o'clock. So we're trying not to be reliant on a whole succession of amazing formats. We try at 8 o'clock to offer a variety of different kinds of bits of two-ness, really.
You're looking for more live propositions, is that?
I mean, you know, as anyone knows who who comes in to talk to us, 8 o'clock is, we're always looking for what is the next big idea going to be? And, you know, of course, very interested in looking at new formats all the time. I think my only advice is it's best to think anew. You know, it's best to think, what do you learn from sewing bee, rather than can we make it but just with, I don't know, crochet. You know, it's more about thinking what are the things that we know the audience like about it and how you can translate that into a new show, rather than thinking, as I say, you know, doing a sort of something that feels a bit similar.
Well, one of your shows that is certainly not niche in any way, shape or form is Secret Life of Cats. Let's have a look at the clip.
So the secret world of cats happens close to your back door, just out of sight. Even if they don't go far from the cat flap, they're still busy, patrolling round and round the same area.
Which do you think is the one who's travelled furthest?
I think Susie's the one who's done the most walking around.
What we're seeing here on the screen is the very first indication we've ever had of the detail of the pet cat's life when it's outside the home.
Well, nearly 5 million viewers. What was the secret of its success, do you think?
I've always been obsessed by the idea that you could bring together high science, I mean proper analytical, cutting-edge science knowledge, with things that people really feel very, very strongly passionate about, i.e. their pets. And, you know, when you say how difficult it is to predict how big things are, I always did feel this one might be quite significant.
So pets mean prizes, basically?
Well, it meant prizes in that respect, although again, you see, I think what was very particular about it was that very distinctive BBC Two pairing. I was hoping, I think it's that guy who had one of my favourite Astons of the whole of the year, which was something like world's scientific cat expert. And, you know, it brought together real cutting-edge knowledge. I mean, these were people from the Royal Veterinary College, from, you know, proper accredited scientific institutions who were doing real serious science. And I think that's the thing that made it work. It was the coming together of a subject that, you know, people, if you've got a cat, you do genuinely wonder, what's it do all day? If it's not asleep on the fridge, where is it? What's it doing?
It's not serious science, though, is it? It's science.
No, well, that's because that's only
because I'm not a cat lover. No.
Well, I can tell you're not a cat lover, but you can.
I'll let the neighbour's cat in.
You can have serious science applied to subjects which aren't always the handful of very serious subjects. So, you know, finding out what the sort of, I mean, the behavioural aspects of domestic animals. I mean, if I was writing a scientific paper, I might describe it like that, rather than here's a programme on cats, everybody. But actually, it did have in it quite a lot of genuinely new research, which will inform an area of science that will go on to tell us new things. But it would not have been a BBC Two programme without that expertise. It's that works so brilliantly. You know, the honesty, actually, of realising that that is a question that people who love their pets really would quite like to know about. Now, you know, that's only one part of the science we do, and it will never push away our bigger, grander, more classical pieces of science journalism, but it just shows that if you can get the right subject, there is an audience there who like that kind of crossover between the domestic and the passion that they have in their own world and the big science out there too.
Well, I might not be a cat lover, but I do love my cake, so I really, this is a good moment to talk about, I mean, you know, what can I say, 5.6 million on average, Great British Bake Off, I mean, an absolutely rapturous reception. You must be totally over the moon about that.
It's fantastic. I mean, it's just a brilliant show, and you know, it's to see it find its, you know, to see it go on that journey and sort of find itself as a major show has been an amazing thing to watch. I mean, again, you know, to me, when I look at it, it has so many things that are, I suppose we're returning to them quite often in this conversation about, you know, that very BBC Two relationship between content and pleasure. You know, between it's a very entertaining show, but you know, you will learn about a courting cake, which I'd never heard of a courting cake. You know, I learned
Lancashire courting cake. My mum used to make it. I
Sounded
told you I loved cake.
sounded like quite a, you know, that sponge and shortbread sounded like
it's
quite
gorgeous.
quite heavy. But you know, the fact that you do that, to me, it has all those elements that I was describing earlier on. You know, the judgments are real. They're very respectful. These are all shows that take the audience very seriously, and you know, they're not about sharp-elbowedness at all. The thing that always amazed, I think one of the things people love about Bake Off is its good-heartedness. You know, the fact that actually, even in the final, you see this actually in MasterChef Professionals as well. You know, even in the final, one contestant will help another if they're in trouble. And I think that's quite, you know, that sense of decency and good-heartedness and generosity is a really important part of it.
Well, was there good-heartedness within the Beeb about this? I mean, did you have to fend off BBC One sniffing around, trying to pick it up?
Well, you know, 5.6, you know, provoked some sniffing. But, you know, at the moment, we're just very happy to have it, and it feels as though it's a lovely show for us, and, you know, we'll see where it goes.
You didn't quite answer the question.
Well, I don't have an answer for you, because, you know, at the moment, all I can say is that, you know, we have it, we're happy with it, and we'll see what happens.
Right, so they would have loved it. They've been sniffing around, but you're saying no way.
I think it's just, you know, it's a bit like a flag going up, isn't it? If you have a programme that ends with over 7 million, it's not going to be unnoticed, is it?
And that's a worry for you.
I think it's something that if you're running a channel like BBC Two, you have to take in your stride. You know, one of you will, if it. You know, we nurture this programme. We love it. Big successful programmes. Who knows? You know, it's happened to things like Who Do You Think You Are? We've seen programmes move in other moments, and you can't legislate against it. You know,
there's very little you can do. If they pull rank, they can get it. Is that right?
Well, I think you have to be a bit more collegiate than that. You know, I mean, we all sit together and share each other's problems. I don't think it's so much that you're not embarking on some sort of turf war. You just have to be a grown up about it and think, you know, that's a mark of our success, really. And if you know, we love it. It's a great series, but in the end, if that does happen, you have to think bigger BBC.
Now, it did get a rapturous reception. There was a few little sort of snarking about the elephant in the room and Paul Hollywood's personal life. Is there ever a point where your stars, what they do in their personal lives, sort of impinges on what you're seeing on screen?
Well, I think we always try to make sure. I think our presenters know that they're always presenters. I mean, even in their private life, they will always be seen as a BBC presenter. But in the end, what goes on in their private life is not necessarily something that we can manage, and they have to manage that for themselves.
But they do have to manage it.
Well, I think, you know, they're aware of that themselves. That's true for anybody who's in a public role and gets public attention, is to be aware that any of your actions are going to be subject to some scrutiny.
Sounds like a shot across Mr. Hollywood's bows.
No, I don't think it's that at all. I think he knows himself. He's been very open about knowing that, you know, if you are in the public eye, your actions will get attention, and it's just about being aware of that. But in the end, the private lives of all our presenters are their own affair, and not for me to comment on.
But do you feel a bit sorry for the way in which he's had to sort of live all of that out publicly?
I don't really have any more to say about that than that.
Fair enough. Well, just leading on from Mary Berry, really, obviously a massive star, possibly your most massive star. Let's talk about talent on BBC Two. There is a criticism that it's still a bit white, middle class and male, Mary Berry being the exception to the rule. Let's have a look at another clip.
This is a musical account of Henry V's overwhelming defeat of the French at Agincourt in 1415, when Henry's much smaller army overcame a far bigger one. perhaps the moment at which the English came nearest to achieving the centuries-old ambition of conquering France, and it quickly became the stuff of legend.
Is there a danger of BBC Two being seen a bit still, despite all your efforts to bring on female presenters, as being a bit too white and male and middle class still?
Well, I think I would take issue with the fact about efforts to bring on female presenters still not. I mean, the implication there is that that hasn't borne fruit. And
it is still. It's obviously improving.
Well,
but
I think it's improved quite considerably, actually. And I think, when you look now across BBC Two and BBC Four, we have nurtured quite a significant range of authoritative women. I mean, one of the things I wanted to do when I took this job was to try and find ways of having women presenting specialist factual programmes, because often those are the places where you are most consciously an authority figure. And when I look at, you look at Mary Beard, I mean, Mary is now a massive, it's not just Mary Berry, there's Mary Beard, a massive, a significant figure in the culture, really, off the back of perhaps 3 series that she's done with us. Bringing on a new talent like Joanne Fletcher, who's a brilliant archaeologist. Anyone who saw her brilliant series about ancient Egypt knows that not only is she a woman, but in terms of your class point, she's also has a very distinctive northern accent, and she's very proud of her class background. So she doesn't sound either. She doesn't look like your classic male authority figure, and to her credit, she doesn't sound that way either. We've got a whole host of female presenters, from Lucy Worsley to Nina Ramirez on BBC Four. I mean, the thing about that, if your priority is to get women in positions on television who are authoritative, finding authoritative presenters isn't easy. I mean, it takes a while. And when I look at that landscape, I feel much more confident than I did 3 or 4 years ago that actually we have got women who are not also just there to do one series. These are people now who are regular contributors across the 2 channels. They are now embedded, if you like, into the kind of repertory company of the channel. So I think, the days when you could say, look, it's all really half a dozen white men is not really true. I think it's true we've got a better record on women than we have on diversity, although I think we're getting to a better place there now. We're just about to start a new series with Raggy Omar on the Ottomans coming soon. I've just commissioned, as part of our World War I series programming for next year, a great new presenter who's going to be doing 2 programmes for us about the experience of non-white combatants in the war. We've got Anita Rani doing something for us on population. I always think it's a bit invidious just to go through a list, but we are working very hard, I think, to find people who I think can be returners. I mean, for me, that's always the thing. It's not to just get someone to do one thing, but to feel that you can invest the time with them. That's what I've tried to do with the women presenters, to give them the chance of becoming a significant presence on the channels.
And Mary Beard has clearly achieved that. And
yes, well, watch this space with somebody like Joanne. I mean, she's somebody who's done really very little television, only as a contributor, but whose Egypt series did very well. And off the back of that, we've commissioned another one. I mean, I think that's the other thing. You have to be prepared sometimes to go outside a comfort zone. You have to be prepared to find people who haven't necessarily done a huge amount of television in the past. It's quite rare to have done nothing. Usually the people that we develop have had a role as a contributor. But I think we've actually been quite brave in saying, look, we will give you a series, even though you haven't actually done very much. If we believe in you, we're going to work with you hard to try and give you a series and bring you on.
Well, I want, just before we move off this point, one thing that interested me about Mary Beard, for example, is when you look at all the horrible Twitter stuff that she had to endure, do you think it's harder for a woman to become a national treasure?
I think well, as the news over the last few weeks has shown, I think that it certainly is. I mean, I think anyone who goes into public life now is likely to find themselves on the receiving end of quite a lot of Twitter or blogosphere comment.
But more women than men.
I think there's a certain kind of comment that does seem to come women's way, yeah. And I think, one of the things that we have to do is try and find ways of not letting that make women feel that they don't want to do this, that actually that they feel that the price is too high, if you like, for doing it.
You've got to have a thick carapace, basically.
I think you have. I think you've got to. I think you've got to do that. And I think, you know, we have to be clear that we have to support people, and you know, make them feel that we're here to help and to support them in any way we can. But it would be very sad if if in some way that put women off thinking, I could do that. You know, I could be that person.
Well, the next clip is a woman, and a very tough one at that.
But the new girl at court was a shrewd operator.
We don't know to what extent she loved him, if she ever did, or if she operated on a basis of cold ambition. But she strikes me as a woman slightly too cool, detached, and intelligent to stake everything on love.
Well, a well-regarded original programme, is that kind of thing now, because of the financial constraints, is that a rarity?
No. I mean, that's one of I love that programme. And again, I'd say, just before we get on to how we pay for them, just as a sort of message to the creative community. See, that's quite an interesting show for me, because that got over 3 million viewers. And it was a different kind of history programme. So effectively, it was a debate about somebody's reputation. Rather than a more conventional show which sort of takes you through a biographical story, it actually had quite a lot of argument in there. You know, the contributors really didn't agree about what kind of person Anne Boleyn was. You know, was she a wily trickster, or was she an innocent victim? You know, there was a lot of debate in that programme. And I found that just so refreshing. You know, it was just wonderful to see people interested in history from a lot of different perspectives. You know, Hilary Mantel as a novelist versus and Philippa Gregory versus more conventional historians. You know, how they think about, how they approach their subject matter. It's a very, very rich show. So we want more of those, not less.
More Hilary Mantel.
Well, more. I mean, you can do that, I think, because it's a big subject. So. Anne Boleyn is a subject that people already have a kind of opinion on. You know who she is, and you've sort of especially if you've read any of the novels about her, or you've seen any of the movies, you know, her motives are something that if you're interested in that world, you might have had a bit of thought about already. So that works. You can't do those sorts of shows with a very small subject. So I'm very aware that there may not be a huge number of them, but it's really worth thinking what the others might be, I think. But, you know, going back to your point about can we afford to do any more of those? I mean, yes, DQF has had an impact on all channels.
Delivering quality first, yeah.
Sorry, delivering quality first. On all channels. Our daytime really has been the place where there have been most changes to our schedule. And we've done that in order to protect programmes like that. I mean, for me, the key to where we hold on to our money is absolutely in peak. You know, those are the things that a BBC Two audience most expects from us, is to give them a very, very rich diet of very distinctive, quintessential BBC Two programmes in peak.
But it's been pretty catastrophic for daytime, hasn't it?
It's been a challenge for daytime. I mean, yes, you can't say that's not true.
A challenge sounds like something manageable. I mean, it is you're managing it.
Well, you know, that's the reality of the situation. If we have to make savings, we have to make savings, and in the end, you know, that does mean cutting back on original programming somewhere. There will be an impact, so one has to acknowledge that. You know, that is just the truth of the situation. I mean, at the moment, it's our shoulder peak is actually doing rather well. You know, we've got a lot of good stories to tell from the earlier evening, but we have tended to concentrate. Obviously, that puts our focus more on our peak output. And we're doing really well in peak at the moment. So, although overall it does impact the total reach and share of the channel, in terms of what you look at how we're doing in peak, we're actually doing very soundly.
Let's have a look what you've got coming up. Let's have a look at preview, basically, of BBC Two.
It's the story that made me want to be an historian in the first place. For I understood when I was quite small that there were two special things about the Jews, that we'd endured for over 3,000 years, despite everything that had been thrown at us, and that we had an extraordinarily dramatic story to tell. And somehow that these two things were connected, that we told our story to survive. We are our story.
We're a nation of dog lovers. Take this village in the middle of England. It's home to 1,500 people and over 120 dogs. Big dogs, small dogs, hairy dogs, speedy dogs. The dog is one of the most varied species on Earth. But how did one wild wolf species become the tame companion we all know and love with all this dazzling diversity?
It's your best in now for the 2:30 at Kempton. What we got on Percy Piper? Piper game running this off, mate. Down to fours. Okay, well done, boy. You want to push that now, mate. 2 towards still. Get your bets in now. What you saying? We got Sovereign, he's an old favourite. 4-1. Tommy! Tommy! Tommy, look at the book. Yeah, what do you want, mate? Just look. Tommy! All on one of them, boy. Good work, John.
There's a real mix to look forward to there, a lot to look forward to.
That's a range on BBC Two, isn't it?
It really is. So tell me, what do those clips show about the direction you're taking the channel in?
Well, I suppose carrying on that amazing variety of programming that takes us from a sort of a classic landmark documentary filmed over continents with a big presenter at its heart. You know, those remain very important to us. You know, very. Expertise for me is at the heart of everything we do in the channel, whether it's Bake Off or whether it's Brian Cox, they're all or Jeremy Paxman. They're all actually experts in what they do, and we retain I remain absolutely committed to that. So yes, we're still looking for big landmark ideas, things which actually have the heft and the ambition that you feel only the BBC could do that, and only BBC Two would do it in that way. So definitely looking for more of those. The dogs show comes off the back in a way of what we were just talking about. The cats, you know, that's an earlier evening offer. You can see
prefer
there.
Dogs, by the way.
Oh, they're all right for you. But that will have some of the same things I was talking about earlier. You know, what's the science of what's the science behind the different breeds of dog? You know, why are they the same size as puppies and then end up so hugely different in later dog life? So that will have, although there'll be entertaining elements of that again to me is a sort of, that's what BBC Two looks like when we're trying to entertain you as well as inform you. So very, very keen, and that's in a way an amplification of what I was saying earlier. You know, the 8 o'clock format, we are so keen to keep talking about what looks new and different in that slot, but that has that thing that we know our audience want, which is a bit of substance as well. You know, make me smile, but do tell me something, really. And Peaky Blinders is a drama set in the Birmingham underworld of 1919. Not many channels that can say that, really. It's a cracking yarn. It's really brilliantly shot. It's a thriller in its own right. But again, you know, taking our audience into dramatic places that other channels wouldn't do. So the sort of amazing diversity of the drama offer that will take you from the contemporary world. I mean, that's a costume drama, but not perhaps of the kind we're used to. So I look at that and think that's what we're like when we're firing on all cylinders, when we've got a range of different things, a variety of different tones, but what they are linked by is the ability to just take you into a world that you feel you don't know too much about, to be both informed and entertained, really.
I was a little bit disappointed being a Hilary Mantel fan, not to see any sign of Wolf Hall yet. Give me hope.
It's coming.
How soon?
Coming. Sometime next year.
What's happened? Why is it taking so long?
It's just talent. It's just it's just making sure that the amazing talent we've got when they're available to do it. If you want really, really great talent, sometimes you have to wait. But believe me, as I'm sure Ben would say, nobody wants this more quickly than I do. But you know, I'm so excited by it, and I'm quite prepared to wait.
What gaps are you looking to fill? What are you still looking for now?
Well, I think everything I was saying there about, you know, you can never have enough great new talent. You know, a channel in the end is defined. When I was at Channel 4 many, many years ago, I remember being involved in a marketing campaign which we had, which just showed the faces of the channel. There was nothing in it but that. And in a way, you know, that there's a real truth there, because the talent that you have on the channel says a huge amount about who the channel is. So we're constantly looking to refresh our talent base. We love the people we've got. As I was saying earlier, I'm really glad that our repertory company of talent is a bit broader, a bit bigger, and includes a few more people that weren't there before. We could still welcome more people into that group. Big, ambitious ideas, though, something that actually has something to say. I mean, the thing that I always say to people pitching into BBC Two, into factual, a subject isn't the same thing as a programme. You know, a subject is the starting point. What do you want to say about it? What's your attitude to it? How do you want to deal with it? Bring with you a kind of an interested attitude to surprise the audience, as well as just, here's a subject that we're going to go through in a quite conventional way. In documentaries, which we haven't talked much about in a way, and which have been one of the huge successes of BBC Two, actually. I mean, Claridges, obviously, a very classic form, actually. You know, the obs doc inside a great institution, but when done with that level of genius, what a great watch that was. And I think documentaries that have about them that edge of entertainment, you know, it had great human stories in there, answered your curiosity about what can this place actually be like inside. So, you know, there's clearly an appetite out there for well-made, people-driven documentaries about the now. We've had very lot of success with everything from The Tube onwards, the series that we made about the railways, or that we've done about London transport buses. You know, all of those did really well for us. And I think there is a real appetite out there still for a version of the contemporary world, you know, a vision of who we are now that actually has about it, is put together in such a way that it can entertain you as well as tell you something about the world. So, you know, we're still very hungry for that sort of very distinctive documentary output as well.
And you've said several times that your mission is to be brave. Do you think you've been brave enough, or is there still scope?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one, isn't it? I mean, I think you'd be a very complacent person if you could answer yes to that, wouldn't you? You know, you're always hoping that you can recognise something brilliant when it's brought to you. You know, that's in a way the measure of it, isn't it? And to just carry on thinking. I think as a channel controller, it's incumbent on you to think, there's still so much more we can do. We haven't got it right yet. Even when you've had a fantastic year like we have, you have to keep saying, but there's other stuff we could do. Complacency is the enemy of success, I think, and you just have to keep on looking for the next new thing, or looking for the next exciting thing. And that's about you know, us giving a message, if you like, to the creative community out there. Keep bringing us the things that you think are going to surprise us, or are going to, you know, and I hope we'll be brave enough to listen and commission as we've done in the past.
Now, we've spent a lot of time talking about BBC Two. You've also obviously got another job now, yes. BBC Four. Let's deal first with your predecessor, Richard Klein. I mean, under him, BBC Four was on the up. Many say delivering quality first put paid to that. What are the cuts why he went?
Oh, you'd have to ask Richard that. I don't think so. But, you know, he had a very successful tenure as a channel controller, and, you know, he obviously felt there were interesting things to do elsewhere.
But let's deal with the cuts, though. What effect have they had on BBC Four?
Well, I mean, actually, the channel continues to be, I think it's one of the fastest growing channels in the landscape of channels at the moment. You know, it's got a very devoted audience that gets bigger every time you look. I mean, I ran BBC Four for a bit, and well, 4 years actually. And when I look back now at how big it was then, you know, if you look at the trajectory of growth that channel's been on over the past years, you can see that it hasn't edged off at all. You know, it's still in a place that's growing. Its AIs are, I think, the highest across the portfolio of BBC channels. So, you know, there's no sense at all that there's been any kind of, I don't think, a break put on its success at all. I think it's still in a very healthy place, and, you know, will continue to be so.
But it's no longer commissioning and, you know, history drama cut by a third, I think I'm right in saying. I mean,
well, all channels. I mean, you know, all channels have had to accommodate to the need to make savings. BBC Two's done the same, but I think that within that, it still feels a very lively, very distinctive place to be. It's still commissioning programmes that absolutely no other channel will commission. It's still speaking very clearly to the audience that love it. And I don't actually see any diminution in its originality or its ability to grow.
Well, let's have a look at another clip, just really to ask you if this is what you're looking for.
To start with, when I first began doing taxidermy, I was so overawed by the animals themselves that I would get inspiration from just looking at a bird or something, and it was a much more instinctive thing. So I'd walk around with a bird, and I'd put it on things and in things, and I'd sort of just see the way it moved and the colours, and I'd sort of just kind of I'd handle it for a day or something, I suppose, and start to kind of get a feel for how I think it might look good, or what elements I could juxtapose it with to make it, to sort of bring out the beauty in it.
Perfect BBC4 show.
Tell me why.
Well, you know, it's absolutely. I mean, that's a series that's actually done really well for BBC4. You know, it gets very healthy figures, and it gets you into things which are often regarded as being quite challenging. You know, this is the world of contemporary art. This is often, as that suggests, you know, that's not doing another series on the Impressionists, is it? You know, that's a different sort of attitude, and you're rewarded for it. You know, they're very well made shows, and they have about them a kind of an honesty, really. You know, you do get to actually understand what the motivation of some of these creative people is, and I just think that's a very good example. We were talking about bravery earlier on BBC Two, but that's a very brave commission for BBC Four, and it's a
Could you not see that? Could you see that on BBC Two? I mean, what's the difference?
I don't think so, really. I mean, I think that what BBC Four has the ability to do is to follow. To go deeper and to do more particular sorts of shows.
It's just too wacky, is it, for BBC Two?
I think if you actually watch the shows, the wackiness isn't their only, isn't their defining tone. But I think I think what it does do very well is actually do the thing that BBC Four is there to do, which is to put you in the company of people who are, you know, who are not people that everyone has heard of, but that you will be in their company for quite a long time and understand what motivates you. I mean, you have time on BBC Four. You have a bit of extra space to, you know, to just let things develop a bit more, less intensely, if you like. You know, it's a place. It is a very special place. I mean, when I was running it earlier, you were very aware of that. You know, it's a very unique train set, BBC Four, and it does allow you to do things that, yes, are sometimes tougher on a more mainstream channel.
And is it a train set you'll sometimes steal the way that BBC One steals some of your best stuff?
Well, I think, you know, in an ideal world, I mean, there are talent. For example, there are people who've begun their careers as presenters on BBC Four, who've gone on to make programmes for BBC Two as well. I mean, Lucy Worsley's a good case there. She still makes very good programmes for BBC Four. Michael Scott, who's just done a series for us about the classical world, you know, he has had a life on BBC Four before coming to BBC Two and continues to do so. So I think it's more. I'd probably describe it as more sharing than stealing, really. But
I'm sure that's what BBC One would say about trying to nick Bake Off.
Yes, possibly. But I think that, you know, that is again one of the. You do have an opportunity there to let people follow their passions, to let people sometimes grow in a slightly less exposed environment than one of the bigger channels. And that, I think, is one of the reasons why its audience love it so much. It's very unpredictable, BBC Four.
How do you think you'll make your mark on BBC Four? People say, oh, yes, we can see how she's doing something different.
Well, I mean, I think BBC Four is in a very healthy place. I don't think it's in a place that needs, you know, you don't look at it and think, oh my God, how are we going to sort that out? On the contrary, you know, it's in a really good place, making programmes that do really well for the audience and are absolutely core to the reputational aspect of what it needs to do in terms of culture, music, performance. You know, it does all that stuff absolutely brilliantly. So I don't think we're looking for any massive gear change or swerve in the road. I think the thing for me that I'm very keen to make work. The opportunity of running two channels like this is to get more complementary and collaborative moments. So there are times when I'm hoping that 2 and 4 will be able to join together more easily than perhaps they've done in the past.
What do you mean by that? Because I mean, Tony Hall said something similar, hasn't he? He said that, you know, the relationship between 2 and 4 needs to be looked at, and he's going to say more shortly.
Well, I mean, for example, we've commissioned a series on 18th century music for the beginning of 2014, and what we've done there is right from the beginning we've commissioned complementary programming to go together. So we've got a performance documentary on BBC Two, and we've got a series that Lucy Worsley's presenting on BBC Four, and some other supporting output. And that allows you to, rather than perhaps sometimes trying to bring things together after the event that have already been commissioned, you're able to look at it from the beginning and think, how can we make this offer feel something that the 2-4 audience is really going to enjoy? I mean, we've got a similar collaboration with the Science Project. We're going to do a series of programmes about the atmosphere. And again, what we've commissioned there is a very distinctive BBC Two series, which is about the sort of the science of the atmosphere. On BBC Four, we've got a more historical approach, looking at, you know, the discovery of air, people's understanding about what air was and what the component elements of it. And those, hopefully, will mesh really well together. We can trail them together, we can market them together. And the intention is that they should feel more than the sum of their parts. And that's just a general desire across the board to try and bring together those moments where those two channels feel they've got something to say to each other, to make that feel as though that's intentional and meant, and makes it feel bigger.
But it's kind of like a more too, really, then.
Well, I think, I mean, the other thing I was going to say, the other side of that, though, is that we're all very keen to make sure, though, that actually BBC Four retains the sort of original, the dynamism and energy. And, you know, you mentioned quirky. You know, I think we want to make sure that the channel editor who will work with me, actually, that's going to be one of their key jobs, is to make sure that they are absolutely pushing BBC Four constantly to keep reinventing itself, to keep thinking about what's distinctive about what it does, to hold on to that very distinctive tonality that everybody loves about BBC Four. So we're trying to make sure that there are opportunities where we can come together, but without actually, as it were, blanding everything out. You know, we want there to be a strong commissioning voice in the mix, talking about this is what I think, this is what I believe for Four, and this is how it should work. I mean,
and without people saying, oh, why do you need a BBC Four anymore? Why does the BBC need 4 terrestrial channels?
When I was running BBC Four, people used to say that quite a lot. I very rarely hear that now, you know, and I think that's a tribute to the channel, that it's actually, in a way, what it produces is a justification for what it does. You know, when you look at those shows, you can see that actually nobody else does do these things, and it's a very important part of our mission, our broadcasting mission, really. And that's why we're within a structure which is going to allow us to be, I hope, a bit more complementary with each other on occasions. We're very, very keen to preserve that unique flavour that makes Four what it is, and not to lose that in any way.
Well, let's take a peek at what you've got coming up, what that unique flavour will look like.
In his hands, the music becomes another character, reacting to what's on screen, allowing space for dialogue, sound effects, even to the point of matching a note sounded by a coffee grinder when it's working.
That is a great series. I mean, again, to me, quintessential BBC Four. You know, this is a series about music written for movies, basically, but done with such panache and fantastic clips. I mean, just fantastic human stories. And it covers really music from the earliest days right up to, you know, sort of contemporary film composing. Great cast. But it's very wittily made, you know, just very entertaining, very witty, and a total pleasure from start to finish. But again, for me, you know, that is a quintessential BBC Four series, really. Huge amount of pleasure, huge amount of knowledge, lots of recognition. You can just watch it with total enjoyment from start to finish, really.
And just before we take some questions from the audience, so get ready, people, just want to ask you about you, really. I mean, you've had 5 years in the job. A lot of people have said next will be full-time career in history writing. Is that something you see beckoning? I mean, or are you here for many years to come?
Blimey, anyone who knows how long it's taken me to write my book would know that that's not really a very good option for me. No, I'm very happy with what I'm doing. You know, I'm still very stimulated and excited by it, and so at the moment, just very content, really.
And doing the 2 jobs in one?
Well, I've only just started. I've been doing it really for about 3 or 4 months, and we haven't got we're not quite got everything in place yet, but I mean, it's been a fascinating thing to do, and I do think there's an opportunity there to, you know, take all the things that I hope we're quite good at and make us a bit better. So that's a good challenge as well.
But it feels eminently manageable.
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know, I'm very, very lucky. I suppose I'm the person at the tip of the iceberg in talking about all these things, but the truth is I have a brilliant channel team who do amazing, amazing work, and I have a really brilliant, I work very closely with an amazing commissioning team, you know, who are really committed to BBC Two, who really understand the channel, and, you know, through them I'm able to call on really extraordinary, exciting talent outside, you know. I mean, all the programmes we've seen are a measure of the amount of amazing creative endeavour that's out there, and it always, I mean, I'm constantly surprised by people really want to go the extra mile for BBC Two, you know, and you can see that exactly the same thing with BBC Four. People really love working for the channel, I think, and really want to do their best things, and that's a fantastic thing as a channel controller to be able to call on, really.
And the biggest challenge ahead?
I suppose, you know, when you've had a very, very good year, you just want to keep it up, really. You want to, you know, I feel this was a brilliant year for us, and that's both very energising and a little, you swallow hard.
Daunting. Okay, so let's take some questions, and there's lots of tweets which I'll sort of try and get through as much as possible, but questions from the audience, if you could say who you are, where you come from, even if you're incredibly famous, and also keep your questions relatively brief so we can get through as many as possible. So who would like to be first? There's a chap over here towards the back. There's a roving microphone, by the way.
Hello, Simon Curtis. I just would like to ask Janice what you think it says about the television environment, that big dramas like Parade's End or The Poliakoff start in a massive tidal wave of publicity, and the audiences don't necessarily stay with the show during the run.
Well, I think there's probably that there are natural audiences for shows. I think it's always great when you can get lots of people to come in and give things a try. I mean, that's what the marketing is there to do, is to say, come along and see, you might enjoy this. You can't guarantee that it will be to everybody's taste. You do what you can to try and remind people to come back and to keep them engaged. But in the end, you know, there are some perhaps more complex or demanding series which are going to find their natural audience level and be happy there. So, you know, you try your best to make it the beginning of a series as inviting as possible. You try to get as many people through the door as you can. Only they can decide in the end how long they're going to stay with you for it, really.
Another question. I had a question on Twitter that I've just lost, so that's a bit of a technology fail. Another question from the audience. Anyone want to ask anything else? Question just sort of fourth row back here. There's a microphone wending its way, and I shall try and find this Twitter question that seems to have disappeared.
Alex Russell. Why do you think the UK market has always tended towards short-run series rather than the kind of very long ones that you get in the US?
In drama, you mean?
Yeah,
or just in
drama
factual?
comedy.
In drama. Well, I just think we have a different, you know, we have a different buying model. We have different sort of expectations from the audience. I mean, I think on the whole there's still a concentration on the single writer in British drama, and I think that inevitably caps probably the number of hours that any one person can deliver. I think also we have probably a greater variety of individual dramas rather than one. I mean, if you think there's a finite amount of money, in the end you have to make a decision about, am I going to do 26 episodes of this, or am I going to do 3 series of different things? And I think traditionally in the UK, the preference has been for variety rather than length.
I have found the Twitter question. @Transmediology says, what is the multi-platform strategy for BBC Two?
Well, you know, we've just gone on to HD, which is fantastic. We've also just gone on to Twitter, which is quite a revolution.
Just,
yeah.
You're a bit late.
So, you know, well, you know, the channels are going there bit by bit, and you know,
why so slow on that? I mean, is there a sort of reticence because, you know, Twitter is sort of a little bit dangerous?
So. I think it's just you know, there are a lot of calls on our resources, and you get there when you can. But I mean, you know, we're very committed to the channel having a sort of you know, a multi-platform identity. That's been part that, you know, there's a lot of strategic work going through, thinking about how much of that will be reflected through channels, how much of it is reflected through genres. You know, what are the ways people want to come in the multi-platform world and consume content. So that's ongoing, I'd say.
Another question, right at the front here, Maggie. Oh, so Mike, just here in.
Maggie Brown, media journalist. Could I just ask about the some of the strategies you might have for getting around delivering quality first? Are you going to do more narrative repeats, for example, within the week, and maybe more repeats on BBC 4 from BBC 2? I just wondered how you're going to fill out the gaps, really.
Well, as I was saying, you know, what we've tried to do is to protect peak as far as possible. So, you know, we have tried very hard to minimise the need for those sorts of repeats in peak. When we do them, I mean, my own feeling is that often it's about what is a repeat, really, isn't it? You know, a repeat can be something you've just seen before, or it can be a pleasurable catch-up. And I think we make those decisions almost on a case-by-case point. So there are some programmes that do benefit from a narrative repeat, and others that you feel do less so, and you tend to decide that as you go. I mean, I think the other thing to think about is how we use our archive. So when you were talking about Dad's Army earlier, I mean, I think there is a difference between a repeat of an archive programme that you've enjoyed and something that you've seen only very recently. And, you know, we do think quite a lot about how we can mix origination with archiving to make pleasurable events rather than that don't feel like we've just put together a lot of repeats. They feel as though it can be an evening or a season or a moment. So we continue to explore those as well, really.
Guy in the yellow T-shirt in the middle here.
Thank you. My name's Andrew Blair. I'm from Den of Geek, so got quite a genre-specific question. What are the likelihood, drama-wise, of there being shows along the lines of science fiction, fantasy, dystopia kind of shows in the near future?
Well, you'll be pleased to know we've got a factual series about science fiction coming quite soon, which is a big deal. I mean, I'm quite interested. I'm interested in thinking about those territories for BBC Two. You know, I think it's an area that could do quite well for us, and you know, there are a number of different things we're thinking about at the moment. But I think it's a territory we haven't been into much in the past, and I think we should be thinking about in the longer term what that sort of programming looks like for Two, because I think it would look different than what it would look like for One. You know, do you go along the lines of an adaptation of an existing work, or is it an original piece of work? You know, there's thought to be done about it, but I think it's an interesting territory for us.
There was another question towards the back. Yeah, lady at the back in pink. Mike should be wending its way. Disappointingly few questions on Twitter, which probably vindicates your strategy not to get on it.
Hi, Laura Mansfield from Outline Productions. Janice, you've talked about shows on your channel which other people might want on their channels. Are there shows on other people's channels that you really admire and that you either wish you commissioned or are your favourites?
Well, I was a great fan of Game of Thrones. You know, that's rather to your point, really. You know, I just think it was. I think it was a really interesting series. Just went somewhere completely other. You know, I don't know. You look at that and think, what would that look like if that was on BBC Two? You know, and I think that was a really interesting show. And it's quite good sometimes to just sort of look at something a bit outside your comfort zone and think, wow, that'd be quite interesting, wouldn't it? So yes, I do like that one. I did like, I think I've probably said this before, I think Educating Essex was a very fine show that Channel 4 had. And, you know, I do think had something very, you know, big and important to say about education, actually. So that was a thought. But I think the one that I find is most interesting in terms of the bigger question is a show like Game of Thrones, you know, which isn't in the usual territory for BBC Two, but you look at that and think, you know, it's quite an interesting thought.
Well, Janice Hadlow, thank you very much. You've answered an array of questions. Yeah, but I'm sure it's felt like quite a mouthful. It wasn't that bad.
No, it wasn't. It was fine.
And thank you, the audience, for listening.